Geoff Brock is the local government minister in South Australia. And Geoff, look, as best we understand, there are potentially 46 councillors and mayors, 3 mayors and 43 councillors, most of which are in regional South Australia. Is that correct? Invalid from sitting in office?
You're right, Ricky. That's about the numbers I've got, but I'm only being advised from what the Electoral Commission is advising me, because as we all know, the last local government elections in November last year were all handled by the Electoral Commissioner, because since the previous one 4 years previously in 2018, the sector wanted to carry it out. The local government sector didn't want to carry out the elections under their own sphere, and so they made it quite clear that they wanted to put it to the Electoral Commissioner, and that was from the local government sector. And also the Parliament then had a bill which was passed in 2021-22. Saying that this one would be better for transparency and independence than if the Electoral Commissioner did it. And fortunately, it's been done. And unfortunately, there are certain incidents there, two things, where there weren't enough nominations at the last general election. So therefore, currently at the moment, there are some supplementaries to fulfil those unfilled positions. And now, because everybody knew the criteria, the legislation was very, very clear. 30 days after the election, you had to submit your forms, and then if you didn't do that, the Electoral Commission sent more information, up to 12 notices out to people who didn't have their nominations in. And look, the end of the day is that the nominations are the declaration, and a lot of people are saying, I had a nil return, but for transparency, we need to have transparency out there. And if you had a nil return, you still have to submit that, as I did as the last state election. And then if you had donations over $500, you had to then put that in. But unfortunately, about 40-odd people didn't do that on the time. So we've got the situation now with all those people now have to apply to SACAP, which is an independent commission, away from the local government sector, away from the Electoral Commission and away from the politics, to hear the reasons why they may have overlooked all the reasons for them not getting the second return in.
It does sound like, though, there's not likely to be strong extenuating circumstances for those individuals if they just didn't get around to it or didn't read all of their emails. If you say there were 12 communications, according to the Electoral Commission, to them, not likely there's going to be any appeals upheld unless somehow they were, distracted by the bereavement of a family member or something.
Oh, look, Ricky, that's for the SACAP Commissioner and his board to make those decisions, and for each the people who are in that situation at the moment to make their case to the SACAP Commissioner. But certainly I'm disappointed, quite frankly, that we all know the criteria. The information I've been given from the Electoral Commissioner is that they were explaining this at the nomination. They explained it right through the process. And look, it's happened. We need to work our way through this. And what I'll be doing is looking at the opportunities. How can we ensure that this doesn't happen again? I've made this public before. After each election, the Electoral Commissioner has to have a review of what happened. And I've had discussions with the Electoral Commissioner. And also I'll be undertaking myself with the Office of Local Government, working with the Local Government Association to ensure that it has the process in the last general election in November. Was that the best process? What can we learn from that, and how can we do it better?
Yeah, I want to get to that in a moment, but you mentioned as a state MP you've got to submit your returns. Would it be acceptable in state parliament if an MP like yourself continued to vote and have the influence they do as an MP if they were not compliant? Why do we have this process where they're still basically functioning as a councillor until the appeals process is resolved?
My information, two things. As the local MP, as an independent, I'm not too sure about the party members. The party may do that on their behalf. I don't know, because I'm an independent. But if we had to put returns in on a regular basis, whether our returns, and it was not once, it was on a regular basis because it was a fairly long campaign period. And if I didn't do that, my information was that I would not have been allowed to serve as a member of Parliament. My information is from the Electoral Commissioner. As soon as these people were advised that the returns weren't in by the allocated time or required time under the legislation, then they ceased to be a member of the council. So therefore, those positions are out. They're vacated until such time as the process goes through the SACAP Commissioner, and the SACAP Commissioner will make the decision, yes or no, you stay on, or you go for another supplementary. But certainly I know some councils that lost their mayor or a couple of councillors, they've, with mayors in particular, they've now appointed acting mayors in the interim period.
Yeah, and I understand that. And that's how I would have thought the system would work. But then that means that even though there's this secrecy about who all of the 43 councillors are, I think it's clear now who the mayors are. We'll have to wait to the next council meeting for who's not attending the meeting, but to work out, well, who's the invalid councillors.
I'm with you. Yeah, look, unfortunately, when this happened, even when the nominations were there, I, as the minister, are not, because this is why the previous government and the previous president of the Local Government Association, who was Sam Telfer, and he was also the past president in that particular period, in actual fact, they do not tell me who was nominating, and that may have been an issue, whether some of the unfilled vacancies within the general election. But even now, I got last Wednesday, I think it was Wednesday night, Wednesday night it was, I got advised by the Office of Local Government, who had just been advised by the Electoral Commissioner that this was happening. So therefore I had a meeting with the Electoral Commissioner the next day on Thursday at 12 o'clock. At 2 o'clock I made a ministerial statement to advise the Parliament what was going on. But even now I am not told by the Electoral Commissioner who these people are because of the privacy and things like that. So this is why the previous government and the Local Government Association wanted to take it away from the politics, away from councils, but unfortunately maybe that's maybe not the way to go in the future, but certainly we have to learn from this here, but I want this to be sorted out sooner than later, and we'll just have to work our way through this as quickly as we can.
And just lastly, I've got to let you go back to Community Cabinet, but on this front, you talk about we have to learn, you're conducting an inquiry, other inquiries are happening. The opposition has called for an independent inquiry. Is there a place for something that is like a parliamentary inquiry that looks into this so that it's all out in the open as we try and pick our way through what I guess was a teething problems? Is probably a kind way of putting this situation where there's possibly a second set of supplementary elections now?
Well, look, as I said, the process has gone through, and I think there's been an issue. Look, I'm learning, I'm talking to people as we go along, and it's interesting that we all knew that these forms should have been lodged sometime in December. As I said earlier, then the deadline was with them, by a month later. They still failed to do that. So that was a total of 2 months. And then what he has got is he's advocated for me to clean it up at the appropriate time. That's fine, but we need to go through this process. The delegation or the legislation is very, very clear, and we have to abide by the current legislation. So again, I'm working through this at the moment. I am working with as much as I can, but I've also got to be very careful that I don't interfere with the Electoral Commissioner, who is independent of the Parliament, independent of political stuff. So we need to be very clear with that. But I am looking at ways we can overcome this, but I have the transparency. I made it quite clear in Parliament. I knew about it on a Wednesday, late until about 6:30 on Wednesday night. 12 o'clock next day, I'm talking to, and this is what Sam wants. He wants to understand, when was I told, Well, the first time I knew about it was Wednesday about 6:30. Thursday, I have a meeting at 12 o'clock with the Electoral Commissioner. I have to tell the Parliament have to tell the Premier what's going on. And then also at 2 o'clock, I'm making the ministerial statement. So that's my awareness of this. If I had known before that, I wasn't allowed to be told under legislation. But certainly we need to learn from this here, but we certainly need to. I feel sorry for these people, but at the end of the day, we all know the requirements when we're doing something. And myself, if I hadn't done the returns as the state member, I may not be here today.
Sounds like some changes to the Local Government Act might be happening before the next election, Geoff Brock.
Look, certainly, Vicky, we need to make sure we look at this, have a complete review, but I am working very, very closely with the Local Government Association in particular, because we've got to work together. We can work together, but I've got to be very careful about trying to direct local government, the LGA or the Electoral Commissioner, but I am working with the LGA to see how we can go with this.
Geoff Brock, thanks so much to the Local Government Minister for joining us. I know it's a busy time for you. Thanks again.
No, my pleasure, Ricky, and good luck.